LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the May 13th Mother's Day edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. I picked out the weekend's dozen best, most newsworthy clips for what should be a really educational, informative, fair use media criticism and political analysis show for you all tonight. The two political comedy sources will be last night's Saturday Night Live Weekend Update and Friday night's Real Time with Bill Maher monologue, which seem to have covered some of the news stories better than the big five corporate outlets that I take the rest of my clips from, of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States. Actually, NBC News' Meet the Press was preempted this week, even though their slogan is, if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press. I even tweeted to them. They said they were preempted, so I said, shouldn't they change their slogan to something that's factually accurate? Still haven't gotten a response. I'll let you know if I get a response. But my big topic for today, or the one topic for today, is Trump versus Trump and Iran. It's sort of like a double topic because Trump is having some sort of foreign policy successes, but in some ways he's getting in his own way, and that was the theme of one of the news summaries, the State of the Union news summary from Jake Tapper that I'll get to in just a couple minutes after I show the two comedy clips. The first comedy clip I want to show you, like I said, is from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, which tells you some things about the release of hostages from North Korea, or prisoners from North Korea, and some things about Michael Cohen that you won't see in any of the big or any of the corporate media outlets that I'll show in a little bit. They definitely skimped on some of the facts from those stories. Bolton and Real Time with Bill Maher and Saturday Night Live did a better job. Here's the 2-minute clip. It's a couple parts of the monologue edited together. Oh, and by the way, if you want to follow along with my clips, my dozen clips are listed on my clip list here, which there's a link down to the clip list in the video description. The sources of almost all my clips are also down in the video description, including the monologue from Bill Maher on HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher last Friday that started with the couple jokes I show here, and then I edit in some Michael Cohen jokes because those are the two topics I want to talk about, and I'll talk about them with you after we watch it together over here.
You know things are going bad when the only good news is coming out of North Korea. That's what According to Trump, this week, though, is one you will be telling your grandchildren about, because 3 Korean Americans who you never heard of and didn't know were gone are safely home, ladies and gentlemen, and that's good. We like that. But Trump met at the airport at 2 a.m. Did you see that, out in the dark? And he was very thankful. He said, "He would like to thank Kim, who really was excellent to these 3 incredible, really excellent. He took them hostage and forced them into a labor camp. What we here call an Amazon warehouse." But excellent. Kanye tweeted today, "They only thought they were slaves." North Korea's in your mind. But it was actually easier to get them back than we thought. They wrote a check to Michael Cohen. Good to go. But now, the big political news this week is that Trump's amateur lawyer, Michael Cohen, had a slush fund where he would take money in from people who wanted access to Trump, like AT&T and pharmaceutical companies and the Russians, and then pay the money out to people Trump fucked at a golf tournament. You've heard of a rainy day fund? This is a stormy day fund. This Michael Cohen is such a bad lawyer. His Jewish mother called him today and said, "Michael, why couldn't you have grown up to be a lawyer?" Yeah, the name of this slush fund was Essential Consultants. I love this. Essential Consultants. There was only one of them. They weren't essential, and they did no consulting. And their slogan was, "There are some things money can't buy. The president is not one of them."
So I thought those were several good jokes there, and more importantly, as I said before I showed the clip, you got a lot more information about what happened with Michael Cohen this last week than on any of the corporate news outlets. The big breaking news this last week that Michael Cohen not only used that Essential Consultants LLC Limited Liability Corporation to pay off Stormy Daniels, and then remember last week we were talking about how Rudy Giuliani had said that money had gone into that account through like a $35,000 a month retainer that Donald Trump was paying to Michael Cohen. But this week we found out that a Russian a company associated with a Russian oligarch put in a bunch of money. AT&T put in a whole bunch of money. A Korean aircraft company put in a bunch of money. Novartis, the drug company, put in a whole bunch of money. And this is like the beginning of a possible scandal. I mean, at worst, it's a really smarmy pay-for-play legal scandal. And if Trump actually ended up getting any of that money, rather than just Michael Cohen being paid for his intelligence and advice, then there could actually be some violations of the law. And that was also covered pretty well, I thought, over on Saturday Night Live's Weekend Update, not on the corporate news media, and also some of the other things that Trump did. And I thought the Weekend Update jokes last night were the best I've seen in a while, especially the last joke in this clip that I will discuss with you after we watch that clip together over here.
I gotta admit, President Trump had a pretty good week. He helped secure the release of 3 American prisoners from North Korea, and when he greeted them at the airport, he didn't even say, "Wait, I thought they were Americans." Trump bragged that him greeting the prisoners was probably the highest ever television ratings for 3 o'clock in the morning, which is not true. The 3 a.m. ratings record was set on election night by liberals hoping they were being pranked.
I mean, sure, this has been a decent week for Donald Trump. The same way a decent date with R. Kelly is to go home dry. Personally, I don't like when Trump is this quiet. It's like when I'm babysitting my nephew and he's quiet for too long, and I'm like, oh no, he's eating out that litter box again, ain't he? According to a report, Michael Cohen was paid $600,000 by AT&T to advise them on their $85 billion merger. AT&T could not be reached for comment because they use AT&T.
It's really funny to me that all these companies were paying Michael Cohen, this guy, for intelligence. He's like if the word "der" became a person. This is true. Cohen named his shell company Essential Consultants, which could not sound more fake. It's like a place George Costanza would pretend to work at. Meanwhile, President Trump attacked the Russia investigation and insisted that obstruction of justice is, quote, a made-up, phony crime. Oh, the crime you're accused of? That one's made up? It's funny how when it comes to immigration, Trump is like, the law is the law. But when it comes to himself, he's like, laws aren't real. They're just stories we make up to scare poor people.
So that last joke there, I think, is the best joke I've seen on Saturday Night Live in a long time. It reminds me of how when Trump or people in Trump's orbit get in trouble, he's all about due process. But when it comes to people who are not like Trump and not in his inner circle, all of a sudden it's, the law is the law, as Colin Jost was saying. Trump has the most narcissistic, self-centered view of the rule of law of any president I can think of, maybe since Richard Nixon said, when the president does it, it's not illegal, or, that's basically what we're seeing here. And Saturday Night Live did good coverage of that and of the Michael Cohen scandal. The breaking news in that from this last week did not show up in hardly any of the corporate outlet news summaries. The closest that we really got was in the 1-minute news summary at the beginning of CNN's State of the Union. Jake Tapper said the state of our union this week is global, talking about the foreign policy successes or possible successes of the Trump administration, and then contrasting them with how Trump's getting in his own way. That's actually the source of my Trump versus Trump title for the video tonight, and I will talk about that a little more with you after we watch that 1-minute clip together over here.
Hello, I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, where the state of our union is global. President Trump is trying to keep the focus on his major international moves as unforced errors from his own White House compete for attention with foreign policy. The president took to Twitter Saturday to call former President Obama's Iran deal, quote, a big lie, and point to a new announcement from North Korea saying, quote, North Korea has announced that they will dismantle a nuclear test site this month ahead of the big summit meeting on June 12th. Thank you. A very smart and gracious gesture, unquote. International stability may now depend upon President Trump's negotiating prowess. And the president is gearing up for another major foreign policy week. Monday, he will appear by video at the opening of the new U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem, as foreign ministers from Germany, France, and the U.K. plan to meet without the United States to try and save the Iran nuclear deal. And here to discuss President Trump's national security.
And I will have a clip of John Bolton a little bit later, but the National Security Advisor was on a couple different shows. But I have to agree with the Jake Tapper analysis there that whatever possible foreign policy successes, and I see in the comment section someone's already saying that I've admitted that Trump is having foreign policy successes. Well, the thing is that a president, that's where the president has the most power and the most autonomy is in the area of foreign policy, where so Trump has been flexing his foreign policy muscles, and certainly getting the release of those prisoners from North Korea. It's hard to say that's anything but a success, except for the way Trump talked about it, which I think plays into what Jake Tapper was saying about Trump sort of getting in his own way or messing up his own message. And also I think that was sort of an allusion to a member of the Trump administration attacking John McCain, or making a bad joke about John McCain opposing Gina Haspel as the CIA director because of torture, and saying, well, it doesn't matter because he's dying anyway. And that, of course, that didn't come up in the Fox News Sunday news summary I'm about to show you. And also the problem that I showed earlier about Trump calling Kim Jong-un's treatment of prisoners excellent, which I'll show you the full clip of what he said when the prisoners made it back to the United States. And I'm next going to show you this Fox News Sunday news summary, which not only doesn't talk about the Michael Cohen thing, doesn't talk about the Trump getting in his own way with the release of the North Korean prisoners. I mean, it basically just talks about foreign policy successes and describes them as promises made, promises kept. It's basically the most pro-Trump, as usual, of all the news summaries. And, Fox News often, even in their supposedly straight news segments, it's like their news stories could have been written by the White House Public Relations Department, could have been written by Sarah Huckabee Sanders. So here's Chris Wallace handing it over to Kevin Corke to describe the foreign policy successes of the Trump administration in the last week over here.
And a happy Mother's Day from Fox News in Washington. North Korea has scheduled what it calls a dismantling ceremony at its nuclear test site ahead of President Trump and Kim Jong-un's Singapore summit. That's now less than 1 month away. The plan to negotiate a nuclear deal with North Korea comes as the president pulls out of an agreement with Iran. And Mr. Trump says he wants to signal the kind of hard bargain he'll demand from Kim. In a few minutes, we'll discuss the summit, what happens next with Iran, and growing tensions in the Mideast with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo in his first interview since he returned from North Korea this week. But first to Kevin Corke at the White House with the impact of dramatically changing U.S. policy around the world. Kevin.
Chris, senior White House officials characterize the president's recent foreign policy decisions, each, by the way, with major global implications, in 4 simple words. Promises made, promises kept, but a more nuanced assessment might be even simpler. America first. That's because whether it's North Korea, Iran, Syria, even Israel, what you have now is a clear departure, not just from the previous administration's approach, but from Washington orthodoxy. In each case, for example, in North Korea, you also have a policy of engagement bathed in subtle aggression, but also tempered by the promise of cooperation.
America's track record of support for the Korean people is second to none. If North Korea takes bold action to quickly denuclearize, the United States is prepared to work with North Korea to achieve prosperity on the par with our South Korean friends.
In the Middle East, the administration's rejection of Washington orthodoxy also on full display as Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump represent the country as the U.S. Embassy moves from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, a move seen as a symbolic and a diplomatic stake in the ground in full-throated support of the Israelis and against the growing influence of Tehran in the region, which was further disrupted by the president's decision to break the terms of the Iran nuclear agreement this week. There is talk, Chris, that decision by the president emboldened the Iranians to attack the Israelis. As you know, the Israelis struck back, hitting Iranian targets in Syria. It is also certain that they have tacit support in Washington to do so. Chris?
Kevin Cork reporting from...
So I criticized that Fox News Sunday news summary for all the things it left out about the problems the Trump administration had this last week. But one thing they included that wasn't included really in any of the other news summaries and was covered very poorly, I thought, by the corporate news media this last week was the real threat of a Mideast war. Who knows? I mean, could even turn into World War III, although I don't want to get too alarmist. But the exchange of hostilities between Israel and Iran was something that hasn't really been seen before. And if that's what the Trump administration wants from withdrawing from the Iran deal is actual regime change and war against Iran, which I'm very worried is what is going to be coming. That was the worst sign of it. And Fox News Sunday was really the only of the four corporate news outlets that did news analysis shows this morning, was the only one that really covered it in their news summary. You'll see, I'll show a question that Margaret Brennan from CBS's Face the Nation asked Lindsey Graham a little later, but that briefly mentions the idea of a war in the Middle East, but then doesn't really follow up on it and actually focuses on a whole other topic, which that's really disturbing. But before I get to the possible war in the Middle East between Israel and Iran that has the, outside possibility of turning into World War III, I wanted to get to some of the other topic. Well, I wanted to show some discussion of the big attack from a White House aide on John McCain, which they spent a lot more time covering than the possibility of a war in the Middle East that could turn into World War III, which I don't think is a really good use of corporate media airtime in terms of what's most important. You can let me know what you think down in the comments section. But before I get to a couple of the guests talking about this attack on John McCain, which is such a big topic in the news, I want to show the very beginning introduction from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, where Martha Raddatz in her introduction actually shows or explains what it is this aide said, and then shows how Sarah Huckabee Sanders responded to it. This is about 25 seconds over here.
I'm not going to validate a leak one way or the other out of an internal staff meeting.
No apology from the White House after a staffer's inflammatory comments about ailing Senator John McCain.
I don't understand what kind of environment you're working in when that would be acceptable, and then you can come to work the next day and still have a job.
Our Powerhouse Roundtable takes on the debate over civility in politics. From the White House to your house.
Civility in politics. Well, at least ABC showed, talked about it in the very beginning of their show, and they actually explained what it was that was or later they explained what it was that this White House aide had said about John McCain's opposing Gina Haspel as the CIA director who's been nominated by the White House. Said, it doesn't matter, he's dying anyway in a private meeting. And so the next clip I'm going to show is from CNN's State of the Union, where Jake Tapper actually asks John Bolton, the national security advisor, about that. And this is like the one place he breaks from the administration, but it's not because he has such a great moral sense and a love for our former POW, our veterans, and it's because John McCain was nice to him once, so he's going to support John McCain, and I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
About Senator John McCain in a private meeting this week at the White House. The information leaked out. Special Assistant to the President, Kelly Sadler, reportedly joked that McCain's opposition to CIA nominee Gina Haspel didn't matter, quote, because he's dying anyway. As you know, Senator McCain is battling brain cancer right now. It's a pretty horrific remark. You've worked with Senator John McCain. My understanding is you have a decent relationship with him. How do you feel about that comment, and why won't the White House apologize?
Look, I wasn't in that meeting. I don't know what was said or what was done. I'll just say this. John McCain came to my defense in 2005 when my nomination to be UN ambassador was under criticism. He and I didn't know each other very well at the time. We certainly didn't agree on each and every position that he or I had taken, but he spent countless hours trying to help me out, and much of it was behind the scenes. There was no political upside for John McCain in that effort at all, but he did it because he thought I was being treated unfairly. I'll never forget it. I'll be grateful forever, and I wish John McCain and his family nothing but the best.
Meghan McCain said, the thing that surprises me most is I don't understand what kind of environment Kelly Sadler's working in when that would be acceptable and she could come to work the next day and still have a job.
I've just given you my view.
But doesn't the White House have an obligation to apologize for this horrific remark?
I've said what I'm going to say on the subject.
All right. Ambassador John Bolton, we really appreciate your time. Thanks so much. We hope you'll come back.
Glad to be with you.
So there you can see the moral compass of the White House's national security advisor, John Bolton, that it's not that what the White House did was wrong or was, a travesty in terms of the treatment of our veterans or of an American hero, John McCain. It's just John McCain was nice to me, so I'm going to support John McCain. That's just doesn't seem like John Bolton is that principled when it comes to that, but I guess he is principled when it comes to his neocon Mideast war. Well, that's my only John Bolton clip, and you can tell me what you think about John Bolton. You can tell me what you think about his mustache, whatever, down in the comment section. But that's not the only clip I have on this John McCain controversy, which, like I said, was overcovered. And so the second clip I want to show about that is Lindsey Graham talking to Margaret Brennan on CBS's Face the Nation. Lindsey Graham is like, for a long time, has been like John McCain's work husband. I don't know. They seem very, very close. And so, of course, Lindsey Graham is not happy about this attack on John McCain, which I will discuss with you after we watch that CBS's Face the Nation clip together over here.
I want to talk to you about the Middle East, but start first here at home. Your good friend, John McCain, I know you were just visiting with him, and there's been some controversy here over a White House aide's comments that Senator McCain's opposition to Gina Haspel for CIA doesn't matter because he's, quote, dying. Are you satisfied with how the White House has responded?
No, not really. It's a pretty disgusting thing to say. If it was a joke, it was a terrible joke. I just wish somebody from the White House would tell the country that was inappropriate. That's not who we are in the Trump administration. And John McCain can be criticized for any political decision he's ever made or any vote he's ever cast, but he's an American hero. And I think most Americans would like to see the Trump administration do better in situations like this. It doesn't hurt you at all to do the right thing and to be big.
Should the president himself apologize?
I'll leave that up to him, but if something happened like that in my office, somebody in my office said such a thing about somebody, I would apologize on behalf of the office.
So that was Lindsey Graham's response, and apparently, from what I've heard, Kelly Sadler, the White House aide who made this bad joke about John McCain, called Meghan McCain to apologize, and then Meghan McCain asked her to apologize publicly, but then that hasn't happened, so probably not going to happen. And certainly Donald Trump can't apologize because he set the tone at the top when he said, I like people who weren't captured, that whole thing, when he called, said John McCain wasn't a war hero because he was captured. And I mean, I have my problems with John McCain, and his neocon pro-war policies, but I wouldn't attack him for the reasons that Donald Trump is attacking him. That's what's so sad, I would call it sad. If I were tweeting to Donald Trump, I would say sad, exclamation point. But that was the overcovered topic, and you see that Margaret Brennan on CBS's Face the Nation even asked like a follow-up question to Lindsey Graham about that. But one of the brief coverages of the possibility of war in the Middle East between Israel and Iran that could explode throughout, into, the, the outside possibility of World War III. That was really barely covered in the corporate news media this morning. And I showed you the brief coverage in the Fox News Sunday news summary. Now I'm going to show you a couple clips that follow up on that. The first one is Lindsey Graham talking to Margaret Brennan on CBS's Face the Nation. She asks Lindsey Graham about that possibility and also about the lack of a Trump strategy for what to do with Iran after withdrawing from the deal. Trump withdrew from the joint deal between the United States and Iran and the European Union, Britain, France, China, Russia. They were all in this deal, and the United States withdrew. And that's, of course, what the follow-up is. Margaret Brennan does not follow up on this idea that Israel and Iran are in active military hostilities for the first time pretty much ever, at least directly. That there's no follow-up question on that from Margaret Brennan on CBS's Face the Nation over in this clip.
Let's turn now to the Middle East. When you were on this program back in March, you said President Trump doesn't have a strategy to contain Iran and that Israel was careening towards a war. Do you think President Trump has a strategy now?
Well, he's got a strategy to deny Iran a pathway to a bomb by withdrawing from this agreement. 15 years from now, all the restrictions on their uranium program go away. They can enrich and reprocess uranium and potentially plutonium without limitation. So getting out of the agreement, I think, stops a nuclear arms race. But when it comes to containing Iran on the ground in Syria and other places, we don't have much of a strategy.
How does exiting the existing deal to freeze the nuclear program stop Iran from getting a bomb? I mean, many would say the president didn't present an alternative to cut off all the pathways.
And I showed that follow-up question to prove to you all that Margaret Brennan's follow-up had nothing to do with the possibility of war between Israel and Iran. She did make that part of her question, but you saw Lindsey Graham's answer, and there was no real follow-up. And at least as far as I'm concerned, that's one of the most important issues that was not covered very well by the corporate news media this morning. And to make that point even more strongly, I'm going to show you this Chris Wallace question to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo on Fox News Sunday this morning, where Chris Wallace actually talks about the possibility of war between Israel and Iran, and Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State for the Trump administration, says it's ludicrous. And then he actually makes false statements that Chris Wallace never follows up on, as I will discuss with you after we watch that clip together over here.
Iran and Israel got into an armed conflict across the Syrian border this week after President Trump pulled out of the nuclear deal with Tehran. Do you think that there's any connection, that Iran feels less constrained now that the U.S. no longer is part of this this deal about Iran nukes?
That's ludicrous. It's ludicrous to suggest that Iran feels less constrained when during the JCPOA they have now fired missiles into an airport where Americans travel each day in Riyadh. They've now fired missiles into Israel. To suggest that somehow the withdrawal from the JCPOA is driving the Iranian conduct that's taken place during the JCPOA in Yemen, the rise of Hezbollah, all of those things took place during the JCPOA. Indeed, I would argue that they felt they could act with impunity. They watched Europe put exactly 0 sanctions on their missile program during the JCPOA. I think Rouhani and Zarif need to explain why it's the case that while this agreement was in place, Iran continued its march across the Middle East.
President Trump made it clear that he's not only going after Iran, but he's also prepared to sanction European companies that continue to do business.
So you can see, I just, again, like I did with the Margaret Brennan CBS Face the Nation clip, I showed the follow-up question from Chris Wallace just to show you that it was the wrong follow-up question. He didn't really have any follow-up about the Iran versus Israel war that may be breaking out as we speak. Certainly there were some indications of that last week. And the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, in that last clip, I'm pretty sure he said that during the existence of the deal with Iran, that Iran had already fired on Israel, which is totally false. The first time, assuming that Iran actually fired on Israel or the occupied territories of the Golan Heights, there's a New York Times article I read just to confirm for myself that would be the first time there's been direct fire on, Iran has used surrogates to attack Israel many times, but that would be the first direct fire from Iran onto Israel, basically, or ever. So that is a huge milestone that the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, denied having happened this week. And I'm very surprised that Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday didn't follow up on that at all. And then finally, the last topic I want to cover is this way that Donald Trump, when he got these prisoners released from North Korea this week, which, if anything, was a foreign policy success. Having prisoners released is a good thing, although I think under the Obama administration, there were like 11 prisoners released, and Obama never had one of these photo ops like Donald Trump did. And then having the photo op, he couldn't even be disciplined enough to say the right things. I actually, off the White House website, I took a 24-second clip of what Donald Trump actually said when these prisoners were coming home. He said that Kim Jong-un's treatment of these prisoners was excellent, which, if Obama had said that, I think Fox News everyone's head in Fox News, all of their heads would explode. And then he even said that it was so soon that they were released too. That's pretty ridiculous. And well, I wanted to show you what Trump actually said, because they don't even show what Trump actually said when asking Mike Pompeo about it. But first I'll show what Trump actually said, and then I'll show Chris Wallace's question to Mike Pompeo about it. But here's a 24-second clip, and I put some subtitles up because there's like airplane noise in the background, so it's a little hard to hear. But I used the transcript from the White House for it over here.
Hopefully everything is going to work out at the highest level. We want to thank Kim Jong-un, who really was excellent to these three incredible people. They are really three incredible people. And the fact that we were able to get them out so soon was really a tribute to a lot of things.
So if Obama had said those two sentences that I showed in the text there, I think everyone on the right would be attacking him mercilessly because to call Kim Jong-un's treatment of these prisoners excellent, that is ridiculous. That's ludicrous. And, one of them was there since 2015. I think the other two were taken prisoner in 2017. There was this one guy, it was so sad. I read this really sad story when their plane got to Alaska. He asked to go to get off the plane because it had been so long since he'd seen daylight. So to have Trump say that Kim Jong-un had released them so soon, that's ridiculous. And to say that he treated them, excellently, his excellent treatment of prisoners, I don't think that is anything that our president should be saying, but you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. I've been watching this covered on Fox News all week, and they've been attacking Democrats for attacking Trump for saying what I just showed you, but they never really show exactly what Trump said. They don't show Trump called Kim Jong-un's treatment of these prisoners excellent. They don't say that they don't show him saying that he released them so soon, or none of that has been on Fox News. They've basically been attacking Chuck Schumer and other Democrats, saying that they attacked President Trump for getting the prisoners released, which is ridiculous. And you'll see Chris Wallace, when he's talking to Mike Pompeo, tries to make at least a distinction. He says that the Democrats didn't attack Trump for getting the hostages or the prisoners released, but they don't show the right clip that I just showed you. And then you'll see I've edited a question from the panel discussion later on Fox News Sunday, where Chris Wallace actually comes back to this Fox News theme on this, that Democrats should be ashamed of themselves for attacking Donald Trump. Is there nothing he can do that they will appreciate? And I'll talk about that with you after we watch that final clip for the show tonight before the bonus Sandy clip over here.
You brought the American hostages home, and the whole world celebrated that. President Trump praised Kim for releasing them, and that praise, not the release of the hostages, but that praise upset some critics. Take a look at this.
Kim Jong-un did a great service to himself, to his country, by doing this.
We can't be fooled into giving the North Korean regime credit for returning Americans that never should have been detained in the first place.
According to your State Department's latest report, North Korea still holds at least 80,000 political prisoners in its labor camps and other facilities. Is human rights an issue in this summit, or is it just going to be about the nuclear issue?
Yeah, Chris, this administration is always concerned about human rights. It's the case. Not only are there political prisoners that remain in North Korea, there are Americans held around the world by other rogue regimes, too. I can assure you, this administration, I saw it in my role as director of the CIA, and I've seen it now in my first 2.5 weeks as Secretary of State, is intently focused on achieving the return of each of those as well. We had a success this week. We're happy for those families and for America that those 3 Americans returned home, but we recognize there's much work to do. We still have Americans held, and we're working diligently on behalf of each and every one of them.
Congresswoman Edwards, what do you think of the way that President Trump is approaching this summit? And when the president praises Kim for releasing the hostages, and you see Democratic Senate leader Chuck Schumer on the floor criticizing him for that, doesn't that add to the sense that the Democrats won't give credit to Donald Trump for anything he does?
No, I mean, I think it was positive that these 3 Americans were released. The question is, that is a precursor. Even the dismantling of the nuclear site is a precursor. My question is, what are Americans going to get, and how are we going to verify that we've gotten something of substance? I mean, I remain a little skeptical about the ability to negotiate denuclearization in North Korea, but I think it would be a positive development, obviously, if that happened. But I don't want to hang too many hopes on what's going to happen on June 12th in Singapore.
So they had this Democrat on, Donna Edwards, on the Fox News Sunday panel, but she didn't really bring up what it was that Donald Trump really said, that he called Kim Jong-un's treatment of these prisoners excellent. You saw Chris Wallace said he called him excellent for releasing the prisoners, which wasn't exactly what Donald Trump said. And that's pretty typical of the Fox News coverage of this incident during the whole week. It's been, I could have made a Fox News bias video about it. Maybe I should have made a Fox News bias video. Maybe I'll have a chance to make some more edited, produced videos in the next few months, as I'm actually going to get more free time for various reasons. But like I said, that's the last corporate news media clip. I hope you appreciated all the clips I picked out. Down in the video description, you can see ways to support my weekly live stream broadcast. Down there's a PayPal link where you can give me direct donations. And if you give me a $5 donation and your address, I will send you this hashtag LiberalViewer bumper sticker that is weatherproof vinyl that you can put basically anywhere. For a $10 contribution, I will send you this Constitution of the United States that is actually put out by the ACLU, including a Know Your Rights section at the end. Or for those same levels of contribution on my Patreon page, if you become a monthly patron, down at a link in the video description, that actually gives me even more stability to keep doing this programming every Sunday. But before I finish the program, I did promise a bonus Sandy clip. And this week, there was bad news regarding Sandy. She ate something out of the trash Friday night and got really sick. We actually had to take her to the vet, and she's had a really tough weekend, even though, you know, she's had puppies. So before we rescued her from the shelter, based on her abdomen, they said she had puppies, and so she is a mother. This is Mother's Day for Sandy, but Sandy is having a rough weekend. She's very tired, and she actually came into the broadcast room here a couple hours before the broadcast and just laid down and went to sleep. You can see she looks very, very tired in the bonus Sandy clip over here. For show? Okay, less than an hour. It's going to be early. Very, very tired puppy, and she's over there, been sleeping through the entire broadcast. So thank you for joining me. For my live viewers, for the recorded show viewers, I know I did an earlier show this week, so maybe a different set of viewers, but I will be back next week, probably later than this week, and until next week, or until I have some reason to make an edited, produced video and put it up there, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.